What is a cowboy? Where does a cowboy come from? A cowboy in the western United States was a horseman skilled at handling cattle, an indispensable laborer in the cattle industry of the Trans-Mississippi West, and still is a romantic figure in American folklore. Are cowboys an exclusively American tradition? Cowboys are not an exclusively American tradition. The origins of the cowboy tradition came from Spain, beginning with the hacienda system of medieval Spain. This style of cattle ranching spread throughout much of the Iberian Peninsula and was later imported to the Americas. The need to cover distances greater than a person on foot could manage gave rise to the development of the horseback-mounted vaquero. Early pioneers from the United States encountered the vaquero, which means cowboy literally in Spanish, on ranches in Texas around 1820, and some pioneers mastered his skills. The use of lariat, or lasso, saddle, spurs, and branding iron. But cattle were only a small part of the economy of Texas until after the Civil War. The development of a profitable market for beef in northern cities after 1865 prompted many Texans to go into cattle raising. Within a decade, that lucrative industry had spread across the Great Plains from Texas to Canada and westward all the way to the Rocky Mountains. Cowboys were needed mostly for cattle drives, a long process that involved moving the cattle from the ranch to a place where they could be shipped to stockyards in the Northeast. The end of the cowboy era occurred in the mid-1880s, around the time of the invention of fencing and various other technologies that eliminated the need for so many cowboys. How does the image of the cowboy in popular culture differ from reality? Ever since the decline of the cowboy lifestyle, many entertainment programs have perpetuated and romanticized the image of the cowboy. Beginning with the first Wild West shows, popularized by Billy the Kid in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and continued by the movie genre of the Western, the presence and influence of the cowboy lifestyle has had a big share of the media. When asked, what are some of the main differences between the romanticized image of the cowboy and reality, noted cowboy expert William Milston responded with,
That's a great question. I've watched a lot of cowboy movies, with a few exceptions. Some Clint Eastwood movies cover this pretty well, but one of the biggest misconceptions about what cowboys really were is the very fact that a lot of the cowboys were actually African Americans. They were slaves looking for a better life. Once the Civil War ended, you have a lot of freed Africans, and they're looking for better lives. They can't afford to buy land and farm in the South, and a lot of them are looking for better lives. And a good option for single men was to start heading west, head out to Texas and even further New Mexico, and actually help move cows. It's believed that the term cowboy was originally a derogatory term meant for African Americans who were cow hands, the guys that actually helped move the cattle from northern Texas all the way to Kansas. And so cowboy, that term boy being a derogatory term to blacks, making them sound like they're boys, making them sound young and not quite men. That might be where the term cowboy comes from. So that's the most obvious example to me of how the romanticized image of the cowboy is quite different from the reality of the cowboy. Maybe the other romanticized image is quite different, but maybe this is not really something that's changed so much. It's a very hard life. I mean, living in a saddle and traveling for days and days and days, moving cow herds and eating out of the back of the chuck wagon, eating the beans. I mean, beans and beans and beans and beans. This is not exactly a great lifestyle, living out in the open, under the elements. I mean, they're moving those cows, rain or shine, thunderstorms, hailstorms, heat. I mean, the heat's probably even worse. Lack of water, lack of good food. It's a hard life. Hard life.
The image of the cowboy has become so popular that some sports teams, like the Dallas Cowboys, are using cowboy as their team name. Likewise, there have been many cowboy-themed songs, such as Cowboy by Kid Rock, and many cartoons have been made that include the image of the cowboy, such as the popular show SpongeBob SquarePants. Was there a tendency towards homosexuality among cowboys? As John D'Amelio says in his book, A History of Sexuality in America, the cowboy lifestyle was often a lonely one, and very isolating. A cowboy that was married would have a much lower chance of being hired by a cattle owner due to the fact that the cowboy's wife and possible children would require his wages to be higher. Owing to the nature of the job, the possibility for same-sex relationships increased. In the mid-19th century, all men were thought to have strong, innate lusts. and the absence of women may have channeled these desires to other men. When asked, overall, was there a tendency towards homosexuality among cowboys, and what factors may have led to this? Noted cowboy expert William Milston responded with,
the real problem is there's not any evidence of this, okay? It would also be, it would be wrong for anybody to claim there wasn't, that there were no gay cowboys. I mean, that in itself just doesn't make sense either. But if we're going to try to look into it as historians to see if there was like maybe more than the average American society, there's just not evidence of it. Cowboys who were homosexuals are not going to write about it. They're not going to write songs about it. They're not going to be out in the open about it. It's a very masculine world they live in. The cowboys, it's a very rough world, and you can imagine why that's the kind of thing they wouldn't want other people to know about. One of the questions you asked me off camera that I think is worth going into is why are cowboys always portrayed as masculine or heterosexual? Well, the answer may be that's what people want to see when they go to the movies. When Brokeback Mountain came out, of course, that was new ground there. The idea that cowboys, even if they were much later in years, cowboys could be homosexual, because of course there were some. Of course, it just makes sense, doesn't it? That cowboys are not going to have any more or any less than any part of American society.
Many historians have speculated about this topic, but due to the lack of hard evidence, there is no way that it can be proven outright. The belief that there were very likely some homosexual cowboys has been popularized by the recent short story and subsequent film Brokeback Mountain, in which the two main characters, both cowboys, enter into a sexual relationship and fall in love. A beautifully written story, it garnered masses of viewers and inspired a curiosity among the public about the prevalence of same-sex relationships among cowboys. However, as Mr. Milston suggests, the masculine culture in which cowboys lived prevented many from admitting their homosexuality, which in turn led to a lack of documented information. In conclusion, the hearts and minds of many Americans have been enraptured by the image of the cowboy since the end of the cowboy era, due to Wild West shows and the Western genre of films and television that followed. However, the American public has ignored some of the facts about the traditional cowboy, including the fact that they are not an exclusively American tradition. The notion that some cowboys had more of a tendency towards homosexuality has led to no conclusion, despite speculation over the years. America's love affair with cowboys will go on for many years to come, and that's why it's important to know about where they came from in the first place.